Hey, welcome. Something different today. I had seen this thing about your nine square or your video game squares or something along that line, and I wanted to give it a shot because it was something different that I don't normally do, and I also kind of wanted to take a minute to reflect a little bit on where I've come and where I am now as a gamer, I guess you would say. Is that cringe? Is that cringe to say? I'm not sure. But anyway, you know, I hope you enjoy going down, memory lane with me as I explore the nine greatest video games of all time, according to myself. That basically kind of made a pretty big impact in my life. Um, it's not going to include gotcha games, just FYI. Because it wouldn't be a very exciting list otherwise. Because that's primarily what I play these days. But this is, I mean, we're talking young Brian, as it were, and we'll take a look, and it could be fun. By the way, the YouTube algorithm has been rocking me lately, and I know I've been saying this a lot, but it's true. It's happened again. So if you could just make sure you're subscribed, I would appreciate that. First game. First game, man. I don't. How do I start this off? This is not the first game that I ever played. To be clear, this wasn't the first game I played. The first game I ever played was actually Duck Hunt for the NES. My cousin Kenny had a Nintendo Entertainment System, and it was pretty sweet. He had Duck Hunt and Mario Brothers, but I didn't have that. I actually didn't get my own console until the Super Nintendo rolled around, and my parents thought it was appropriate. Donkey Kong Country. This was actually my very first game. Um, I got it for Christmas, along with a Super Nintendo, and it was in a box that was about 6 feet by 4 feet. And my parents knew that this is what I wanted more than anything, and they maliciously wrapped it in probably 8 or 9 different boxes, all the way down, just like a Russian nesting doll type situation. And eventually, but it was the last present I got to open, and I saw the size of it. Obviously, it was much smaller than it was, right? It was wrapped in a giant box down to a small box. But when I saw the giant size of it, I started crying because I was like, I know something that small would not be in a package that big. My tiny child mind didn't understand the concept of pranks back then. And yeah, I ended up getting that. And Donkey Kong Country has been a pretty good game to me. I didn't really like going to school. I didn't like socializing with people. So once a week, my mom would pick me up after like preschool, kindergarten, first grade, whatever it was, and um, she would go get McDonald's. In hindsight, not a great idea because Wheat and me don't get along. But we would go get lunch and then we would come home and we would play Donkey Kong Country. And I would keep playing, like she would play with me, but I would play and find all like the secret hidden spots and stuff like that. It was a good time, and it was one of the few times actually I remember really bonding with my mom. Um, so it was just kind of nice. It was kind of different. That was probably the one time that I could point back to me having like a really really good untarnished memory uh, with my mom, which is weird to say out loud. But I don't want this to turn into like some weird self discovery therapy session, so I won't. But yeah, it's just good memories. It was basically the first game I ever owned, not the first game I played, but and it was wicked. I loved Rareware. That's what it used to be called. It's rare. Yeah, but it was good. I really, really, really enjoyed the game, and it was genuinely one of my favorites. Um, and I still really like it to this day. Honestly, I really like Donkey Kong Country. I would play more platformers. I genuinely do love platformers, but I don't think they do very well over here. Not that I think this video is going to do well either. But I digress. Next up, second game, which I feel like this is like basically the obligatory game that everybody play, right? Anybody from my age group or generation, I guess even kids now, like they all have their own Pokemon game, right? But here's the thing. I'm gonna confess something to you all right now, and longtime viewers will be shocked to actually hear this because I've been perpetuating a lie for the last 7 years. Um, the Pokemon game I actually owned was not Red, nor was it Blue. I never owned Pokemon Blue. What I did own was Pokemon Yellow. I know, but I really wanted Blue, and my mom would not let me get a Pokemon game. Like she knew about the anime and stuff. Um, Obviously, I was watching that, but it wasn't until Pokemon Yellow came out that she recognized Pikachu and was like, "Oh, that's a Pokemon game." Even though there were two other games that said Pokemon on them, she didn't make the connection, and she thought it was some weird thing that I wasn't allowed to have, or like she wouldn't let me play D&D growing up and stuff like that too. It was weird. I had a weird kind of odd childhood. Um, but she recognized Pikachu, and much like typical parents are like, "Oh yeah, that thing." So I did get Pokemon Yellow, but Pokemon Yellow was fine. It was different. I would have rather had Pokemon Blue, but it's okay. We've moved past it. Pokemon Yellow is a pretty important part of my life, just because that was the first kind of like RPG experience that I had. Um, it was also the first game that existed that allowed me to make friends, which is weird. I had always gamed by myself, or that weekday session with my mom in DK country. Um, but I never really played with people at school or really talked about it. I always really kept to myself. I was always really quiet. I just kind of went to school, put my time in, came home, and indulged in stuff that I liked doing, which was playing games. And Pokemon Yellow kind of helped break down the barrier, because once everybody else was into it, then I felt like it was a safe place for me to come talk about the things that I liked. And so I made some friends that way, and there was trading and stuff like that. And obviously, I met some of the best friends that I have today through the Pokemon, playing Pokemon games. Um, so yeah, it's spiraled for sure, but it all basically kind of started with Pokemon Yellow, which I'll be honest, I didn't know how I felt about coming clean, but I figured now is the time. I'm tired of living a lie. Okay, that's really what it is. My first game was not Pokemon Blue. I never owned Pokemon Blue. I always wanted Pokemon Blue, and I spent the last 7 years trying to fulfill that wish. But maybe someday I'll get it. I have it on Virtual Console for what that's worth. So I guess technically I do own it. But there's something different about owning the cart. You know what I mean? I'm a very cart-focused guy. Um, third game, and I'm kind of going in order too. I don't know if that's how you're supposed to do this, but third game I owned that really hit a chord with me was Super Mario RPG. Super Mario RPG was like Super Mario, but better. And of course, it is the ancestral version of the Paper Mario series, which a lot of people liked and then didn't like, and now they hate, but they still kind of like it, and they wish it would be better. But yeah, it all started with Super Mario RPG, and that was the first game that I played that really made me realize, like, wow, there are different types of games out there. Like, because I literally went RPG wise from Pokemon to Super Mario RPG, which obviously had a much more kind of Final Fantasy type vibe to it, and it was just very different. But it had characters I recognized, right, and then some new ones kind of thrown in there: Malo, Gino, just some weird stuff. I mean, there were hidden puzzles all around, and there was this weird Final Fantasy boss Easter egg. I won't spoil it if you don't know what I'm talking about. But there were just weird things, and this was the first game I ever completed. Oddly enough, it was not Pokemon. Weird, right? But Super Mario RPG was the first game I ever completed, and it was so engaging and interesting. And I was starting to realize what like writing in games was, and how it wasn't always just point A to point B. There was humor written in, and it was so cool. And I loved that game. I still love that game. That's probably one of my top 5 favorite games of all time, Super Mario RPG. It's so good. I wish they would do like some kind of weird remaster or something. Going through the forest maze, I have never felt so accomplished figuring that out as a child. Because y'all gotta understand, the internet kind of existed, but it didn't really give you... it wasn't like today's internet that was bussin', right? It was like, oh, do you want to get on instant message chat? And like, they had no walkthroughs, they had no wiki pages, there was nothing like that. So like, you were pretty much on your own for the most part. And being forced to kind of figure that out on my own was a very special time in my life. But I really did like it. So up until this point, everything I had been exposed to was basically Nintendo, right? I was a Nintendo kid because my cousin was a Nintendo kid. But I had another cousin, Jared. And he lived down the street from me. We both lived in the same town. My mom's sister. Yeah. And, we both liked games. We were both kind of introverted, and he had a hard time making friends too. So at some point, I don't know when it was, may have very well been this. At some point, we had like a play date scheduled, and as cousins, seems weird, right? But maybe there was some kind of holiday. I don't know. I was over at his house for something, and I don't know what it was. But he had this game. He had this game on PlayStation specifically, and that game was Final Fantasy VII. Now, I since went on to own PlayStations and get Final Fantasy VII in its base version, and then its remaster, and then its remake. And I still really like Final Fantasy VIII, but the older I get, I keep coming back to Final Fantasy VII, and I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that it's Final Fantasy VII, right? Tifa's one of the, my top 5 best girls. Cloud is amazing. The story is incredible. I went from Super Mario RPG to Final Fantasy VII. So you can imagine the level of depth that occurred just from that transition alone, right? And the RPG elements were there, right? But the writing was different. The characters were much different. The enemies were very different. It was familiar, but it was very, very not the same. But I think ultimately, aside from falling in love with the story and the characters and the atmosphere and the world, and why you needed like 5 or 6 discs instead of just a single game cart to play through the whole game, I don't know. My Nintendo fanboy brain didn't understand at the time. But that was honestly the first time where I started watching someone else play a game. Like really watching somebody else play a game. And being kind of captivated by gameplay, right? Because I had watched other people play games, right? Pokemon, Duck Hunt, my cousin. But when I would go over to Jared's house and watch him play, because I didn't have a PlayStation. It was just kind of this unique experience that, as I look at now, it's like, why I do that? I'm doing what Jared did for me all those years ago. And this was really like the thing that sparked that in me. I didn't know it at the time, but having some kind of engagement around gaming, this was that moment of realization for me. And so it's very special to me for that reason, because this was the first game that, I watched live streamed IRL, basically. Except I physically had to go there. I couldn't just turn on my computer and watch it. See, it's special to me for that reason, and just all the memories attached to it from that. And then, obviously playing something that wasn't Nintendo based really kind of opened up my eyes and to say, oh, well, there's a whole wide world of gaming out there that I am unfamiliar with. How about that? So that was genuinely really cool, and I'm still very grateful for that experience, big time. BanjoKazooie. Back to platformers. BanjoKazooie was just all the puzzles, all the platforming, everything I ever wanted. And it was a game that I had kind of like found on my own. It wasn't something that my mom was like, "Oh, I recognize Pikachu," or "Oh, I recognize Donkey Kong," or "Oh, I recognize Mario," or it wasn't my cousin introducing me to, Final Fantasy VII. It was, I saw the box art. I was familiar with Rare, okay, makers of Donkey Kong. I was like, this has to be good. There's no way this is not good. And I got it, and I played it, and I 100%ed it, and it was gold. And it taught me more so, I think, than Donkey Kong Country, because this was obviously, a 3D platformer, right? A lot of people played Super Mario 64. I didn't do that. I played BanjoKazooie. I never owned Super Mario 64. I know, shocking. But I did own BanjoKazooie. I played the heck out of it. But just collecting all the puzzle pieces and stuff, going through all the puzzles, and just the odd cast of characters and stuff, the writing, and it was so bizarre, and I loved it. So obviously, when Banjo got into Smash, I loved it for that reason. Um, it was a nice little return to form after what Microsoft unfortunately did with him. But it was a nice childhood memory, that I will never not remember. So that was kind of my awakening in realizing that, oh, I can find games for myself. That's awesome. Um, yeah, it was good. Still one of my favorites. I hope they make a Nintendo 64 Mini. Honestly, I have the NES and the SNES, which is officially called, unfortunately, but maybe someday they'll make that and put it back on. Super Smash Bros. Melee. Yeah. So if Pokemon was the first game I realized I could make friends by playing, Smash Bros. Melee was like the next level of that. Um, I can't tell you the number of hours that I spent playing this game. And it was still pretty early on in terms of internet, where he didn't really have walkthroughs and stuff in existence. So I still very vividly remember the moment when I discovered that Giga Bowser existed. Um, and I found it on my own. I don't know how I found it. I just know that it happened. And I freaked out about it. I told my friends about it. And this is a game that Kevin and I played pretty consistently, I would say. We had another friend, Shafe, who also played. I was so cracked at this game that I would take my Marth up against their Fox and Roy, and I would win. Three stock each, so I would have to get 2 kills per their one. Um, I loved this game so much. I didn't really keep up with it because I feel like the whole Smash Melee thing, that the community aspect of it, it never really appealed to me. Um, but it was the time when I realized I can be really good at games. And that's when I realized that there was a skill bracket. And that's when I realized maybe I have something here. Maybe playing games is like a skill. I don't know. Because it had always just come naturally to me, right? But there's a precision and timing and repetition of inputs that you have to learn to be able to play certain games well. And the majority of my list thus far has basically been exploratory, right? Or they had boundaries where if you couldn't go into this house, then the door just didn't open. But Melee was like, well, you're on your own. Play as you will, my boy, because this is it. And it was that time when I was really like, this is cool. Like, I like playing with my friends. I like it being competitive. Um, this is really neat. This is a different aspect of gaming that I hadn't been used to, because up to this point it had all just been platformers and puzzle solvers and RPGs to boot. So this fighting genre, I think, also kind of lended its hand to the next one, which is actually Halo 3. Which Halo 3 is when I got into FPS, first person shooters, and it it's when I realized gamer rage was a thing, I think. It hadn't really been like, I'd get frustrated if I couldn't beat levels and stuff in games I had played prior, but taking it online was just a very different experience that I had not come across. And my friend Shafe basically got me into it. He was an Xbox kid, and I loved it because it was much like Melee in the sense where I had to precision tune my reactions to things, right? How do I approach situations kind of on the fly, right? It was like that, but kind of on steroids. So I really liked it from the challenge aspect that it presented. Um, I don't know, just lots of good memories, lots of LAN parties, you know. Um, and it was the first time I had ever played a first person shooter, and I went back and played the other Halos, and eventually played Reach, which is probably, I think, my favorite Halo installment that I know of. I haven't played 4 or 5. Is 5 out yet? I don't know. Maybe I'll walk down that road again someday. But yeah, Halo 3 was a lot of good times. It allowed me to bond with my brother-in-law, Shane, Jenna's brother, and that was kind of cool. So it opened up some more doors for me too, which was, kind of nice. And I appreciate it for that aspect as well. Not just that it was just kind of like something new. It was a different kind of social engagement where there were teams. Because up until this point, you know, I hadn't really been part of teams. It was solo playing, watching someone else play, or having my friends try and gang up on me because I was better than them at something. And but it was odd. It was odd. I was like, oh, I'm gonna fight with you. Okay, cool. So yeah, and it was the first online game that I really played too. So that was kind of interesting as well. Um, we on 8 now? Oh, we're on 8. All right. So this is the one you've all been waiting for, probably. Mm-hmm. I know. I'm not really sure what you guys maybe expected in terms of Fire Emblem, but I assume once you saw us go from Melee to Halo 3, you're like, hey, isn't there a Fire Emblem game somewhere in there? And it's here. It's here. Radiant Dawn. Radiant Dawn was special to me because it was the first Fire Emblem game I played that didn't have like a Smash Bros incentive necessarily. I mean, we saw Ike. I didn't, obviously, I assumed Ike was in the game, but this was before I really kept up on things intentionally. And so when I saw the new Fire Emblem game came out, I was like, oh, looks like a sequel to Path of Radiance. That's neat. But I didn't see Ike on the box there, and I was like, oh, maybe Ike's not in this one. Maybe he's just in Path of Radiance, and that was it. Um, but this obviously, had Ike in it eventually. But I distinctly remember going into GameStop and taking it off the wall walking over, saying, "I'd like this." And the guy at the counter looked at me and said, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Yeah." And I didn't know at the time that it wasn't selling well because, again, I wasn't keeping up with it. But there was basically some sort of difficulty translation situation that happened with Radiant Dawn. So it did not do well for the franchise because that's when people were like, "Oh, this game's really hard. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard." Where like normal mode was actually like hard mode or something like that. And the main concern of Fire Emblem was, are Westerners basically too dumb to be able to enjoy a game like Fire Emblem? Which is why it didn't come over, internationally for like a really long time. Path of Radiance was great. I don't know that it sold a whole lot. I know copies now are very expensive. But when Radiant Dawn came out, it did not do well. And then the difficulty issue also didn't really help matters much. But I was like, I still want to play this. And so Radiant Dawn specifically kind of holds a very special place for me because it was kind of that Fire Emblem game that nobody wanted, but I still really liked it. And so I felt kind of unique. And this was the time. Fire Emblem was that series where I didn't really talk to anybody about it. And I don't really know why. None of my friends played it. I guess going from games like Melee to Halo to fast-paced platformers like Super Mario 64, BanjoKazooie, whatever. Going from something that's basically just turn-based on a grid probably doesn't seem that exciting. But I really liked the Fire Emblem series, so I kept playing it, and I didn't really talk to anybody. And for the longest time, it was kind of just this series that I kind of secretly and privately enjoyed. And I didn't really talk about it. Even when I went on to make content and play, Pokemon was the staple game, through some Splatoon in there too. I never talked about Fire Emblem. And it was always this kind of recluse where if Pokemon statistics were getting me down or the other games were just kind of Fire Emblem was always that series I could go back to and it would be nice. And it wouldn't wreck me. But yeah, that's probably enough rambling on that. I'm sure you all know the story about it, but it was good. It was good. I to this day, I still think Radiant Dawn is probably up there in my top 3 Fire Emblem games. It's very difficult to choose, but if it ever comes out as like a remake, or if you ever get the chance to play it in some fashion, you should. Because I don't think it was offered the due justice that it deserved. All right, the 9th, and I do have an honorable mention. So before I get to that, I do want to talk about it. It's not me cheating, okay? This is my list. I could do it how I like. Professor Layton: Unwound Future. That game made me cry as like what I would consider to be a young adult man. I am not proud to admit that, but it's the truth. And today is a day of truth telling, so that's what I'm gonna do. It's such a good game, dude, and I really love puzzles and games in the puzzle genre. And the storytelling and the characters and it's the writing, everything is so good. But Unwound Future specifically is probably my favorite of favorite Layton games. And unfortunately, I could not fit it on this list because outside the fact of I really enjoyed it and it's just a stellar game series in general, it didn't really make a huge impact on my life. But I wanted to include it. So I am including it because screw the rules. This is my channel and I can do what I want. So with that in mind, I will share the true final 9th. And people who know me are probably not too terribly surprised. But Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is definitely in my top 3 favorite games of all time. Hands down. It may even be my favorite game of all time. I don't know. Maybe I'll do a list on that sometime in the future. But Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was... I saw the trailer from a Nintendo Direct back when they did Nintendo Directs. Right? Sad. But I saw the trailer. I was like, I know literally nothing about this franchise, but the world looks beautiful. The music is absolute banger. I'm gonna get this. And it was on Switch. You couldn't lose. If you got a game on Nintendo Switch, you couldn't lose. They were all good. So I was like, I'm gonna do this. This is me. This is me committing, trying to find a new franchise, and being happy with it. Because I hadn't done that for like a really long time. This was back during the time when I was like mid-deep into my Pokemon streaming, podcasting world. And it didn't... It wasn't as fulfilling as it could have been, I guess, is what I want to say. You know, Fire Emblem was a bit of a lull. Smash had grown a little tiresome. I think they released like 4 versions of Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze at that point. There's just a lot that was left to be desired. And so I was like, you know what, let's try it. I haven't played a really in-depth JRPG in like a long time. Let's do this. And so I got it. And I kid you not, I have probably 800 hours sunk into this game between it and the DLC. And I have 100%ed both. Don't do it. It's not worth it. But it's such a good game, and the characters are so interesting. So, spoilers. Okay, this is your spoiler warning. It was during a time where I was going through some really hard time, like stuff mentally, right? Depression, anxiety, just imposter syndrome, all kinds of issues. And then when you finally learn that Mithra basically created Pyra out of what I will call PTSD, right? Mithra blew up basically a city, killed a bunch of people, including her friends, and then basically hid within herself, and Pyra was created as a construct, as a front, so that she could shut herself off from, you know, the rest of the world. And that's honestly what I felt like doing. Like, I felt like my streaming persona and stuff like that, I had to mask everything, and so I had to put up a front for everybody. Because I didn't think it was okay to let people know that I was not doing okay. Right? But then I played this, and as dumb as it sounds, I was like, oh my God, I relate to this. I relate to all of this. And I hadn't felt that way about a game in a really long time. And so I would play for 12, 16 hours a day. I mean, there was a stint where I was unemployed and depressed, and just there was so many bad times during, you know, the year and a half that I pumped into this game that it genuinely got me through. Like, genuinely got me through. And it was nice to be able to escape, and this was my escape game. That again, I didn't really tell anybody about. I would always praise it up, but I wouldn't really go into depth. I wouldn't stream it. And to this day, the Xenoblade series, I've gone on to play Definitive Edition. You know, I cherish it. It's another series that I cherish. So it's kind of like when I was playing Pokemon, that was my Fire Emblem, right? And now that my main content staple is Fire Emblem, because I said, well, I'm gonna do whatever I like. Screw the rules. Now Xenoblade is kind of that for me. So I don't know. It's special because it got me through some stuff, I guess, is how I'll phrase it. But yeah, I guess I've never actually looked at, like, I built the scene, obviously, but I never actually looked at all of them together like this. And I feel like this pretty much describes me. I feel like you can get a pretty good vibe from me just based on this. Yeah. I was a simple lad who was into collecting bananas and Pokemon, and then eventually I became a giant weeb. That's exactly what this is. That's what this whole thing is about. Um, so yeah, that's my square. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you found it fun. If you're just chilling. Um, but yeah, that is it. That is everything I think I wanted to say. It's fun, you know. I wanted to do this video because it was something different, and it was a nice little exercise down through nostalgia lane. So, if you want to do the same, let me know. Share your 9 in the comments and give it some thought too. Like really think back to it. That's it. Let me know your 9, and you know we'll see what other people say in the comments. But that's it for right now. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Subscribe. Come back for whatever we have planned tomorrow. And until then, I will catch you next time.